Mackinac Island.
Table of Contents, Mackinac Island.
All about Mackinac Island. With visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney 22 at gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof.
Zoe Phonemes.
And Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator.
Chapter 1. Introduction to Mackinac Island. Great Lakes Grand Discovery Cruise.
Chapter 2. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
How did the Upper Peninsula become part of Michigan? Why isn't the Upper Peninsula part of Wisconsin?
This is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and the states of Wisconsin and Ohio.
The Toledo War, 1835–1836, also known as the Ohio-Michigan War, was the almost entirely bloodless boundary dispute between the U.S. state of Ohio and the adjoining territory of Michigan. The Toledo War originated from conflicting state and federal legislation passed between 1787 and 1805. The dispute resulted from a poor understanding of the geographical features of the Great Lakes at the time, causing Ohio and Michigan to both claim sovereignty over a 468 square mile, 1,210 square kilometers, region along the border, now known as the Toledo Strip, 5 to 8 miles wide. When Michigan applied for statehood in the early 1830s, it sought to include the disputed territory within its boundaries. Ohio then blocked Michigan's admission to the Union. State militias were mobilized and sent to positions on opposite sides of the Maumee River near Toledo. But besides mutual taunting, there was little interaction between the two forces. The single military confrontation of the war ended with a report of shots being fired into the air, incurring no casualties.
In 1836, the Michigan territorial government, facing a dire financial crisis, surrendered the land under pressure from Congress and President Andrew Jackson, and accepted a proposed resolution adopted in the U.S. Congress.
Paul Ryan. Speak of the House. None of this would have happened to my state of Wisconsin if I had been Speaker at that time.
Under the compromise, Michigan gave up its claim to the Strip in exchange for its statehood, and approximately 3/4 of the Upper Peninsula taken away from Wisconsin. Although the compromise was considered a poor outcome for Michigan at the time, the later discovery of copper and iron deposits and the plentiful timber in the Upper Peninsula more than compensated for the loss of the Strip.
In fact, more wealth came out of the Upper Peninsula than out of California during the gold rush, and it supplied 90% of America's iron and copper. Sounds like Michigan got the better end of the deal. Chapter 3. The Straits of Mackinac. Mackinac Island is located at the far western end of Lake Huron, and at the eastern end of the Straits of Mackinac, between the upper and lower peninsulas of Michigan. The Straits of Mackinac form a deep and narrow trench of water that joins Lake Huron with Lake Michigan. Because this deep channel equalizes the water levels of these two Great Lakes, Michigan and Huron are essentially two parts of the same lake.
A single Lake Michigan Huron. The Straits of Mackinac also separates the Lower Peninsula of Michigan from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The straits are a very busy shipping lane from spring to early winter. With the advent of icebreakers, huge tankers still navigate through the Straits of Mackinac throughout the winter, even though most of the surrounding waters are frozen solid.
The Straits of Mackinac includes 4 islands, the populated islands of Mackinac and Wablan, and 2 uninhabited islands, Round and St. Helena.
In addition to ferries, Wablan Island and Mackinac Island can be reached by private boat and, in the winter, by snowmobile.
Chapter 4. The straits are just under 5 miles wide at the narrowest point and is spanned by the Mackinac Bridge.
The 5-mile-long Mackinac Bridge is the 3rd longest suspension bridge in the world.
Called Big Mac or Mighty Mac, this modern engineering marvel, spanning the Straits of Mackinac, connects the Lower Peninsula of Michigan to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The Mackinac Bridge is a toll bridge opened for traffic in 1957, joining the 2 peninsulas for the first time by road. Before the bridge opened for traffic, getting to the Upper Peninsula from the Lower Peninsula required a 45-minute ferry ride.
Plus, the time spent waiting to be loaded on the ferry, frequently as much as 1 hour in summer. Trips across could take as much as 4 hours. This shows the route of I-75 over the Mackinac Bridge. It continues up to the border with Canada at Sault Ste. Chapter 5. Mackinac Island. Mackinac Island is a National Historic Landmark and is part of the state of Michigan. This historic island is a popular family tourist attraction and summer colony, with approximately 525 permanent residents. The island has numerous lodging choices in all price ranges. Personal motorized vehicles are prohibited on Mackinac Island, so visitors can relax and enjoy horse-drawn carriage rides, bike riding, or the old standby walking.
More than 80% of the island is preserved as Mackinac Island State Park. Mackinac National Park, later known as Mackinac Island National Park, was created in 1875 as the second national park in the United States after Yellowstone National Park. In 1895, the park was transferred to Michigan and became Mackinac Island State Park, the first state park in Michigan.
Mackinac Island State Park covers about 80% of the island.
The Mackinac Island State Park contains Fort Mackinac and Fort Holmes, other historic buildings, historic sites, limestone caves and rock formations.
Mackinac Island State Park is one of 6 units of Mackinac State Historic Parks. The other units being Fort Mackinac, the historic downtown buildings of Mackinac Island, Colonial Michilimackinac, Old Mackinac Point Lighthouse, and historic Mill Creek.
Like many historical places in the Great Lakes region, Mackinac Island's name derives from a Native American language. Native Americans in the Straits of Mackinac region liken the shape of the island to that of a turtle.
Therefore, they named it Michilimackinac in Ojibwe, Michilimackinac, meaning big turtle.
The French used a version of the original pronunciation, Michilimackinac.
The English shortened it to the present name, Mackinac.
Why are there 2 different spellings and pronunciations of Mackinac? The French occupied the territory before the British and spelled the name Mackinac but pronounced it Mackinac. The British spelled it the way it sounded, hence the two different spellings. Over time the city retained the A spelling while the bridge, Straits and Island clung to the AC spelling. We will now have a short video clip of Mackinac Island State Park.
This is Mackinac Island, a landscape characterized by high limestone bluffs, beautiful vistas of sparkling water, vibrant forest, and mythical geological formations. Banned on the island since 1898. Here exists a quieter way of life, away from the interstate noise of cities. Horsepower means something completely different here. Over 80% of the island is within Mackinac Island State Park, Michigan's first state. In this park, free of charge and open year-round, where you'll discover the true natural gems of Mackinac. Whether visiting this island haven by foot, bike, horseback, or carriage, these many majestic geological wonderful monuments are visual treasures found only here, on the island sacred to the Ojibwa and Odawa Great Lakes Indian tribes. According to them, this is where life began.
We will now have a short video clip of Mackinac Island State Park.
Mackinac Island today is a major resort location where each summer thousands of tourists enjoy the natural beauty and healthy climate of this island paradise. The island wasn't always a resort. Location at the great juncture of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan has made it a very special place throughout its history. In 1873, the United States Congress was presented with a plan by the Michigan Senator Thomas Ferry to make Mackinac Island a national, second only to the Yellowstone National Park. That same year, the Indian Agency House, seen here, burns to the ground. At this time, the town is described as having 15 stores and curiosity shops, 3 steamboats, and 5 hotels with many boarding houses to accommodate the summer trade. In 1875, the United States government set aside 2 areas of the national park for cottage construction. The east and west bluffs. Within a few years, many lots were leased. After a lengthy survey period, homes were built on the western bluffs by wealthy industrialists from Chicago, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and Detroit, for the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan.
In the late 19th century, Mackinac Island became a popular tourist attraction and summer colony.
Much of the island has undergone extensive historic preservation and restoration. As a result, the island is listed as a National Historic Landmark.
Mackinac Island is well known for its numerous cultural events and its wide variety of architectural styles, including the famous Victorian Grand Hotel.
Since using personal motorized vehicles is prohibited on Mackinac Island, visitors can enjoy horse-drawn carriage rides. Mackinac Island has a year-round population of only 500. The population grows considerably to as many as 15,000 visitors per day. Motorized vehicles have been prohibited on the island since 1898, except for snowmobiles during winter, emergency vehicles, and service vehicles. Travel on the island is either by foot, bicycle, or horse-drawn carriage. An 8-mile, 13 kilometers, road follows the island's perimeter, and numerous roads, trails and paths cover the interior. The road encircling the island and closely hugging the shoreline is M185, the only U.S. state highway without motorized vehicles.
The island can be reached by private boat, ferry, small aircraft, and in the winter, snowmobile. 3 separate ferry services shuttle visitors to the island from St. Ignace and Mackinac City during the summer tourist season. Chapter 6. Mackinac Island History. Mackinac Island was home to a Native American settlement before European exploration began in the 17th century. It served a strategic position in the fur trade of the Great Lakes.
This led to the establishment of Fort Mackinac on the island by the British during the American Revolutionary War. It was the scene of 2 battles during the War of 1812.
The first European likely to have seen Mackinac Island is Jean Nicolet, a French-Canadian coureur des bois, a woodsman or trader of French origin, during his explorations in 1634. The Jesuit priest Claude Dablin founded a mission for the Native Americans on Mackinac Island in 1670 and stayed over the winter of 1670 to 1671.
Dablin's successor in 1671 was the missionary and explorer Jacques Marquette, who moved the mission to St. Ignace. The Straits of Mackinac quickly became an important French fur trading location. Chapter 7. The British took control of the Straits of Mackinac after the French and Indian War, and Major Patrick Sinclair chose the island's bluffs for Fort Mackinac in 1780.
Fort Mackinac was a military outpost garrison from the late 18th century to the late 19th century on Mackinac Island. Fort Mackinac was built by the British during the American Revolutionary War to control the strategic Straits of Mackinac between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, and, by extension, the fur trade on the Great Lakes.
Fort Mackinac was not relinquished by the British until 15 years after American independence. Fort Mackinac was not relinquished by the British until 15 years after American independence.
During most of the 19th century, Fort Mackinac served as an outpost of the U.S. Army.
The fort closed in 1895 and is now a museum and designated a National Historic Landmark. The fort is now a museum on the grounds of Mackinac Island State Park. Although the British built Fort Mackinac to protect their settlement from attack by French Canadians and native tribes, the fort was never attacked during the American Revolutionary War.
The entire Straits area was officially acquired by the United States through the Treaty of Paris in 1783. However, much of the British forces did not leave the Great Lakes area until after Jay's Treaty established U.S. sovereignty over the entire Northwest Territory in 1794.
During the War of 1812, the British captured the fort in the first battle of the conflict, because the Americans had not yet heard that war had been declared. The victorious British attempted to protect their prize by building Fort George on the high ground behind Fort Mackinac.
In 1814, the Americans and British fought a second battle on the north side of the island. The American second-in-command, Major Andrew Hunter Holmes, was killed, and the Americans failed to recapture the island. Despite this outcome, the Treaty of Ghent forced the British to return the island and surrounding mainland to the U.S. in 1815. The United States reoccupied Fort Mackinac and renamed Fort George as Fort Holmes after Major Holmes. Fort Mackinac remained under the control of the United States government until 1895, and provided volunteers to defend the Union during the American Civil War. The fort even served as a prison for 3 Confederate sympathizers.
Fort Mackinac has been restored to its late 19th century state through efforts beginning in the 1930s. We will now have a short video clip of Fort Mackinac.
On a southern bluff of Mackinac Island, towering 150 feet above the majestic Straits of Mackinac, is a fort once occupied by 18th century British redcoats and 19th century American soldiers. This is Fort Mackinac, a military compound that holds significant history spanning several centuries. In this restored fortress, history is showcased in many interactive exhibits and period furnishings that fill the original buildings. At Fort Mackinac, history is alive. Interactive demonstrations, tours, special activities, and children's games are all part of the Fort Mackinac experience.
Does anyone like butterflies? There's a butterfly.
We'd like to welcome you here to Fort Mackinac today. My name is Jeff, and we are going to demonstrate the cleaning, loading, and firing of this 6-pound cannon.
Military demonstrations entertain our visitors each and every day.
Right here, you can step across the road.
Get close to the action, and in some cases, closer than you think. At Fort Mackinac, you're always part of history.
Chapter 8. John Jacob Astor's American Fur Company was centered on Mackinac Island after the War of 1812 and exported beaver pelts for 30 years. By the middle of the 19th century, commercial fishing for whitefish and lake trout began to replace the fur trade as the island's primary industry. Chapter 9. Following the Civil War, the island became a popular tourist destination for residents of cities on the Great Lakes. Much of the federal land on Mackinac Island was designated as Mackinac National Park in 1875. This was just 3 years after Yellowstone was designated as the first national park.
As sport fishing became more popular in the 1880s, hotels and restaurants accommodated tourists coming by train or lake boat from Detroit and similar cities.
Lake steamships were a popular way to get to Mackinac Island from cities such as Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. This is an advertisement for lake steamships going to Mackinac Island. To accommodate an influx of tourists in the 1880s, the steamboat and railroad companies built hotels, including the Grand Hotel. Souvenir shops began to spring up as a way for island residents to profit from the tourists.
Many wealthy industrialists had summer cottages built along the island's bluffs for extended stays.
When the federal government left the island in 1895, all of the federal land, including Fort Mackinac, was given to the state of Michigan and became Michigan's first state park.
The Mackinac Island State Park Commission, appointed to oversee the island, has limited private development in the park and requires leaseholders to maintain the island's distinctive Victorian architecture. This is a vintage postcard of Fort Holmes on Mackinac Island. Motor vehicles were restricted at the end of the 19th century, because of concerns for the health and safety of the island's residents and horses, after local carriage drivers complained that automobiles startled their horses.
This ban on motor vehicles continues to the present, with exceptions only for emergency and construction vehicles. This is a vintage postcard showing the Mackinac Bridge.
All of Mackinac Island was listed as a National Historic Landmark in 1960, and 8 separate locations are listed in the United States National Register of Historic Places.
Chapter 10. Points of Interest on Mackinac Island. This is a view of the downtown and harbor area of Mackinac Island.
This shows the location of major points of interest on Mackinac Island. This is a map of the downtown and harbor area of Mackinac Island.
This is a satellite view of the downtown harbor and Grand Hotel area of Mackinac Island.
This view of the harbor area shows the Tourist Bureau and the Post Office. Chapter 11. The Grand Hotel opened in 1887. Mackinac Island is well known for its numerous cultural events and its wide variety of architectural styles, including the famous Victorian Grand Hotel.
The Grand Hotel is the largest summer hotel in the world and has the world's longest front porch.
The Grand Hotel is a National Historic Landmark and is considered by many travel experts to be one of the best hotels in the world.
The hotel took only 93 days to complete and open in 1887. At its opening, the rates at the hotel ranged from $3 to $5 a night, equivalent to $100 to $160 today.
Today the hotel has 393 rooms, ranging from $650 to $3,000 a night.
In 1886, the Michigan Central Railroad, Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad, and the Detroit and Cleveland Steamship Navigation Company formed the Mackinac Island Hotel Company.
When the hotel opened the following year, the hotel was advertised to Chicago, Erie, Montreal and Detroit residents as a summer retreat for vacationers who arrived by lake steamer and by rail from across the continent.
The hotel retains its late 19th century decor. The hotel was designed so that all the rooms differ in at least one aspect. This is the front porch, circa 1910. This is a view of the village, harbor, and the Grand Hotel. This is one section of the porch of Mackinac Island's Grand Hotel, the longest porch in the world. The Grand Hotel's signature red geraniums are in the flower boxes and on the steps.
The Grand Hotel is well known many notable visitors, including 5 U.S. presidents, inventor Thomas Edison, and author Mark Twain. The Grand Hotel gained national prominence after the 1980 film Somewhere in Time was shot on location at the hotel. Guests are transported from the docks to the hotel via horse-drawn carriage. During the winter, the hotel is closed when ice prevents ferry transport from the mainland. This is the restaurant in the Grand Hotel. This is a hotel dinner menu from 1890.
There are about 500 horses on the island during the peak tourist season in the summer. The carriage horses work a few hours every other day in the summer and rest all winter on the mainland.
Chapter 12. Fort Mackinac is a former British and American military outpost garrisoned from the late 18th century to the late 19th century.
The British built the fort during the American Revolutionary War to control the strategic Straits of Mackinac between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, and the fur trade on the Great Lakes.
The British did not relinquish the fort until 15 years after American independence.
Fort Mackinac later became the scene of two strategic battles for control of the Great Lakes during the War of 1812.
These are some points of interest in Fort Mackinac.
During most of the 19th century, it served as an outpost of the United States Army.
The fort was closed in 1895 and has since been adapted as a museum on the grounds of Mackinac Island State Park. These are the 1859 barracks at Fort Mackinac.
This is the 1828 hospital at Fort Mackinac.
This is the 1816 wood officers' quarters at Fort Mackinac. The Fort Mackinac Post Cemetery is said to be one of only 4 locations in the United States where the U.S. flag is always flown at half-staff. The others are the Punch Bowl in Honolulu, the Gettysburg National Cemetery, and Arlington National Cemetery. This is a map of Fort Mackinac.
Chapter 13. This is the Main Street of Mackinac Island.
The Main Street of Mackinac Island is also State Highway M185.
The downtown streets are lined with many retail stores, candy shops, and restaurants.
This is a view of Main Street.
A popular item at the candy shops is the locally produced and nationally known Mackinac Island fudge. Many shops sell a variety of fudge, and some confectioners have been operating for more than a century. The popularity of the fudge has led to the sales and marketing of Mackinac Island fudge not only throughout Michigan, but nationally as well.
Chapter 14. The Matthew Geary House is a wood-framed single-family home on Market Street, built about 1846, and now part of the Mackinac Island State Park, and listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Chapter 15. The Indian Dormitory was constructed after the signing of the 1836 Treaty of Washington as a school and a place for Native Americans visiting the island to stay when receiving yearly allotments.
Mission Church was built in 1829 and is the oldest surviving church building in Michigan. Restoration efforts have returned the church to its 1830s appearance. Mission House was built in 1825 as a boarding school for Native American children. It became a hotel in 1849 and a rooming house in 1939. It is restored and now houses State Park employees.
The Agency House of the American Fur Company was built in 1820 as the home for the company's Mackinac Island agent, Robert Stewart.
The Agency House is now open to the public as a fur trade museum.
Chapter 16. The Round Island Lighthouse is located south of Mackinac Island on the small, uninhabited Round Island. The light was built in 1894 and automated in 1924.
Extensive restoration efforts began in the 1970s, and the exterior and structure have since been repaired.
Chapter 17. The wings of Mackinac Butterfly Conservatory has free-flying exotic butterflies in a lush garden environment.
The wings of Mackinac Butterfly Conservatory has hundreds of butterflies dancing and chasing each other amid nectar-bearing flowers.
This is a view of the wings of Mackinac Butterfly Conservatory. The original Mackinac Island Butterfly House is the first of its kind in Michigan and the third oldest live butterfly exhibit in the United States. The original Mackinac Island Butterfly House is a world-renowned facility with a tropical garden filled with hundreds of live butterflies from 4 continents.
Insect World is a part of the attraction in addition to the butterfly exhibit.
Insect World has insect displays from around the world, educational information, and live insects. Chapter 18 Mackinac Island is home to many cultural events, and 5 art galleries are on the island. Mackinac Island has been the setting of 2 feature films, this time for keeps in 1946.
And Simula in Time, filmed at the Grand Hotel and the locations on the island in 1979.
Mackinac Island has been written about and visited by many influential writers, including Alexis de Tocqueville, Henry David Thoreau, Mark Twain, and Bill Bryson. Lilacs thrive on the island, and the island's residents have an annual Lilac Festival.
Chapter 19. The Michigan governor's summer residence was built overlooking the harbor in 1902 and was purchased by the state for use as a governor's residence in 1943. The entire island, Haldimand Bay, and a small shipwreck form a historic district. This is Arch Rock on Mackinac Island.
This is a view of Mackinac Island.
This is an view of Mackinac Island. This is a church on Mackinac Island.
Most of the buildings on Mackinac Island are built of wood. A few are of stone, and most have clapboard siding. The architectural styles on the island span 300 years, from the earliest Native American structures to the styles of the 19th century. However, much of the island is built in the Victorian-era style, including Gothic Revival, Stick style, Italianate, Second Empire, Richardson Romanesque and Queen Anne styles.
This is Main Street on Mackinac Island.
Chapter 20. The climate of Mackinac Island. Will it be hot, or will it be cold on Mackinac Island?
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Mackinac City. Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Mackinac City.
Rainfall in Mackinac City.
Here is the average precipitation in inches throughout the year in Mackinac City. The total yearly rainfall is 30 inches, or 773 millimeters.
Here is the average precipitation in millimeters throughout the year in Mackinac City.
Here is the average number of days per month with precipitation throughout the year in Mackinac City. We see that it rains about 9 days every month throughout the year. Recommended videos, Mackinac Island.
Recommended video, Mackinac Island. A 600-year history.
Recommended video, Mackinac Island State Park. Recommended video, Fort Mackinac, Mackinac Island.
Recommended video, Mackinac Island Best Things to Do.
Recommended video, Mackinac Island, Grand Hotel.
Table of Contents, Mackinac Island.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.